Christ is alive. Pope Francis issues a message to young people following last October's Synod on Youth. We analyze the document and its messages. Fight for the unborn. Republican lawmakers are pushing through a bill to protect babies who survive an abortion. Uneasy alliance. The White House celebrates a milestone anniversary for NATO, but its future may not be so bright. Up in Flames, why one of the most popular books of all time was burned by a priest. On EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, April 2nd, 2019. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. In a newly released letter, Pope Francis says some things in the Catholic Church must concretely change and that younger members' critiques should be acknowledged. This apostolic exhortation, as it's called, is in response to October's Synod meeting that focused on the needs of young people today. The Pope addresses young people directly, and he talks about the important role of women in the Church and the need for rooting out clergy sex abuse. Cardinal Lorenzo Baldisseri of Italy, who is in charge of synods, presented this booklet today called Christus Vivit, or Christ is Alive. It was written in Spanish and is available in 6 other languages. Edward Penton, Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register, joins us now to analyze this 9-chapter exhortation. Ed, the press focused on the role of women in the Church and ministering to people with same-sex attraction in October during this synod. So, does the Pope address it?
Very little, actually, Lauren. He talks about, he does mention about the role of women, and he says that women have legitimate claims to justice and equality in the Church, but he doesn't say much more. He stops short of saying that they need more leadership positions. And on homosexuality, he only mentions that word once in the document, just in passing, and that's quite a surprise for some, because that took a lot of attention during the Synod in October, and a lot of people were trying to get the acronym LGBT in the final document. It never made it, and so it almost didn't make it into the apostolic exhortation either.
And I noticed that he did write about love and sexuality within the context of marriage. What does the Pope advise the youth to do who are engaged with the Church and those who feel the Church is a nuisance or an irritant? What's his advice?
Yes, well, he talks about the alienation that young people feel from the Church. He says that some young people find it an irritant and a nuisance, and he puts the blame really on, partly on the abuse crisis. He says that the abuse crisis has disaffected many young people, but other issues too. And I think what he feels is that young people, the Church rather, needs to listen more to young people. And that's also what young people are asking for: listen to their concerns and reach out to them and accompany them. He also talks a lot about discernment too in this document, and very much put the emphasis on what the youth are asking and what they want the Church to be like.
I also noticed he mentioned elitism, and that youth need to be very careful when they are members of the Church not to exclude those who are looking from the outside in. You know, one other thing that really caught my eye, Ed, as a mother of 3 young people, he spells out the dangers of the digital world. And I'm wondering if you could just tell us what he said. I find this a fascinating issue.
Yes, he was quite strong on this. He's talked about this before, of course. He talks about the dark web, as he calls it. He brings out the dangers of digital addiction, pornography on the internet. He talks about cyberbullying. These are all things that young people have to face these days, very much on the internet with social media. But he also brings out the positive aspects too of it, and he talks about, he even refers to Mary as being an influencer, which is very much a digital word. He talks about, uses other sort of millennial language too, about references to God. So he also brings out the positive and the negative about the internet and the digital world, which, as I say, as many people know, that young people spend a lot of time on.
Yeah, I'm wondering what he would say about selective hearing when they have their earbuds in and you ask them something to do. I'm just wondering where he would fall down on that. I'm kind of thinking he would say, listen to your mother. Thank you so much, Edward Penton, Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register.
Thank you, Lauren.
House Republicans file a petition to force a vote on a bill to protect babies surviving abortion. This discharge petition needs 218 signatures to get that vote out of committee and bypass Democratic control of the chamber. But Republicans only have 199 members, so the push is on to find moderate Democrats who will support it. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi explains. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Lauren. Republicans are pushing the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act. It would force doctors and nurses to treat babies surviving abortion and rush them to the hospital. Republicans have tried to bring it up for a vote 26 times. Democratic leaders shot them down each time. So today the GOP tries a new tactic.
Republicans need 218 signatures to force a vote.
They've got to pick a side. Are you on the side of the unborn who you promised to protect, or are you just going to become controlled by Nancy Pelosi and her radical agenda?
More than 20 Democrats need to sign the petition. Then they'd be able to bring up the bill to protect babies surviving failed abortions.
This is about providing medical care to children like me who survive abortions. And at this point in this battle for life, right, I'll be honest and say I'm getting kind of tired of hearing legislators say that every piece of legislation that would respect my humanity is somehow an affront on Roe versus Wade.
These 5 current House Democrats joined 235 Republicans to pass the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act last year. Now Democrats are in charge.
It mandates that doctors treat these babies that survive abortion. Why would you be against that?
Well, I'm not against. I don't want to see any baby, lose their life if they're born and that kind of thing. But I just feel like it undercuts. His whole reasoning is he's anti-choice, and I guess I am a pro-choice person.
I won't sign the discharge petition.
Why not?
I favor reproductive rights for women. They ought to control their own bodies.
National pro-life groups and leaders are trying to pressure moderate Democrats to sign on, especially as some states move to protect abortion up to birth.
The more this stays in the public conversation, the more people choose to contact their legislators and get involved. I think it does change things.
The U.S. Bishop's pro-life chairman is urging representatives to sign this petition. Now, the Senate back in February did not pass this bill. 44 Senate Democrats blocked the Born Alive bill. Pro-life leaders tell me it's still important to have the House vote to get lawmakers on the record and to keep this issue of life alive. Lauren?
Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi. Thank you, Jason. Joining me now from Capitol Hill is Representative Ann Wagner, Republican from Missouri and sponsor of the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act. Representative Wagner, welcome to our broadcast.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be with you and all your viewers.
We've just heard from Jason Calvi, our Capitol Hill reporter, about what happened with the bill. Democrats have blocked this legislation in the House 25 times, and you need more than 20 Democrats to sign the discharge petition for it to move forward. Do you think that there are enough moderates to push this forward?
There should be. This should not be a partisan issue at all, Lauren. This is something that has passed in previous Congress. In fact, in the 115th Congress, just less than 2 years ago, on a bipartisan basis. So, I think that everyone ought to be able to stand for protecting innocent babies that are born alive, giving them the kind of life-saving care that is so deserved by just the very fact that that they've been born into this
into the world,
onto
right?
Earth.
Is this a way of holding members accountable for their positions on life, so it is clear to their constituents as we head into 2020?
It is, and I think this is a human rights issue also, to be perfectly honest. We have brought people together from all walks of life. Today at the press conference there were survivors, there were OBGYNs for life, nurses for life, people from the faith community, people from different civil rights and human rights interest groups that were in attendance, and I hope that every one of your viewers are going to call their members of Congress and make sure that they sign on to our Whip Scalise's discharge petition on H.R. 962, which is the Born Alive Act. And I think every member of Congress should be held accountable on a vote as simple and as easy as this should be. I can't believe in this day and age in the United States of America, Lauren, that we're even having this discussion.
This discharge petition has been used over and over again in the years, and it just doesn't guarantee success. What's next if this fails?
Well, we have brought this to the floor by unanimous consent for 25 full days while the discharge petition progressed procedurally, and we're going to do it every day until Nancy Pelosi absolutely runs with this and allows the U.S. House to have a vote on this issue that is all about life. I believe that life is precious and that babies are a gift from God, and all life is precious at any point in the womb, but most certainly those most vulnerable babies that are born should have the kind of life-saving care that any other child would have.
Thank you so much, Representative Ann Wagner, Republican from Missouri, sponsor of the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act. Thank you. A Catholic-backed pro-life healthcare network receives a $1.7 million federal grant. The Obria Group in California will use it to expand life-affirming medical services, including ultrasounds and prenatal care, to low-income individuals. The grant was made possible when the Trump administration ended a Health and Human Services rule that required grantees provide abortion counseling. Lawmakers in Alabama are seeking to ban almost all abortions, and they are set to introduce a bill to make it illegal to perform the procedure at any stage unless the mother's health is in jeopardy. If enacted, it would be the most restrictive abortion law in the nation and likely would be challenged in court. Venezuela's opposition leader may be prosecuted by the Maduro government. The country's chief justice wants to strip Juan Guaido of his immunity, meaning he could stand trial for alleged crimes in attempting to oust the president, Nicolas Maduro. The country's constant blackouts are also affecting water pumps. Many residents are waiting in long lines to collect drinking water, and one woman says people just ask God for help. A recently appointed archbishop in Chile wants to talk to Pope Francis about the country's clergy sexual abuse scandal.
Yo espero hablar con el Santo Padre del tema de los abusos, del tema de las víctimas.
Archbishop Ausbraca, the new leader in Santiago, yesterday traveled to Rome to meet with the Holy Father, and he says he wants to talk about misconduct and its victims. Authorities say there are more than 150 cases of sexual abuse in the church in Chile. This past weekend in Morocco, Pope Francis warned Catholic missionaries not to force their faith on their Muslim brothers and sisters. And tonight, a cardinal from Pakistan elaborates.
Jesus says, I am the vine, you are the branches, and you must bear good fruit. The good fruit is not only evangelizing and talking and telling the other, you're a bad guy, I'll make you a good guy. We invite people by life, by what we do, by what we believe.
Pope Francis visited Morocco Saturday and Sunday. Catholics there are less than 1% of the population. Coming up, why President Trump hosted the Secretary General of NATO, and a possible delay for the replacement of Obamacare. President Donald Trump suggests he may wait to reveal details of a Republican replacement for Obamacare until after the 2020 election. He says on Twitter that Congress will vote when Republicans hold the Senate and win back the House. The president's attempt to repeal the Affordable Care Act narrowly failed in the Senate in 2017. A White House whistleblower says at least 25 people in President Trump's administration were granted security clearances despite issues in their backgrounds. The problems allegedly include drug use and criminal conduct. Republicans say the allegations are overblown and cherry-picked. White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders says Democrats have no legal right to request security clearance information.
But what the Democrats are doing is playing a very dangerous and a shameful game, frankly. They're asking for personal, private, and confidential information from individuals that they know that they have no right to see.
Sanders says Democrats are putting 3 million people with security clearances at risk by exploiting personal information. House Oversight Committee Chairman Elijah Cummings and his fellow Democrats voted today to subpoena the former White House Personnel Security Director to answer questions about the probe. And President Trump says he hasn't made a final decision on his threat to shut down the southern border. The White House pins the blame on Democrats for not striking a deal over border security. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. The president acknowledged the negative impact on the economy and trade a border shutdown would have, but he says security is his top priority. He says if Mexico doesn't continue apprehending migrants before they reach the U.S. border or Democrats don't come to the table, he'll take action.
If we don't make a deal with Congress, the border is going to be closed, 100%. And this should have been done by other presidents. So many things should have been done by other presidents.
President Trump says capacity to hold migrants at the border is maxed out. He made the remarks while meeting with the Secretary General of NATO today. In the past, President Trump has said he might be willing to pull the U.S. out of the NATO military alliance if member countries don't boost their own defense spending. Now, today he cited tremendous progress has been made, as he says billions more has been contributed to that alliance. Now, the NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg did thank President Trump for his leadership on burden sharing. The Secretary General's visit to the White House marks 70 years since the creation of NATO. Lauren?
White House correspondent Mark Irons. Thank you, Mark. NATO's Secretary General isn't the only high-profile leader in Washington. This week, the State Department is hosting more than a dozen foreign ministers from NATO countries. They are likely to talk about expanding the military alliance, a move some former State Department officials say is dangerous. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee reports from the State Department. Good evening, Wyatt.
Good evening, Lauren. Preparations are underway here at the State Department for the next 2 days of meetings between top diplomats from around the world. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo will be talking about a range of issues, including the fight against ISIS and the role of NATO troops in Afghanistan. Pompeo, for his part, has voiced his strong support of the international alliance. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo welcoming foreign ministers from more than a dozen European countries this week. The State Department hosting a ministerial where allies will mark the 70th anniversary of NATO's founding. Today, NATO, or the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, is made up of 29 member states, but that number could rise. Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg is planning to meet with Secretary Pompeo at the State Department and to address a joint session of Congress tomorrow. He could talk about expansion. Just over a week ago, Stoltenberg said all 29 allies support adding Georgia to NATO. Matthew Hoh, a former Defense and State Department official, says he disagrees with the push to expand.
Its expansion has gone up to Russia's borders. That has reignited a contention with Russia that experts around the world say is the worst it has ever been.
Ho says NATO has not made the world a more peaceful place. The alliance was founded in 1949, countering the Soviet Union's Warsaw Pact. But since the collapse of the Soviet Union, Ho argues there is no need for NATO.
Look at where we were at in terms of conflict or potential conflict with Russia. Look how we have once again divided the world into spheres that are facing off with weapon systems that will destroy the planet.
Stoltenberg disagrees. He says it's vital NATO member states work together in a formal alliance in order to counter new threats from around the world. In January, Secretary Pompeo said the Trump administration has done more good for NATO than the previous generations combined, pushing NATO countries to contribute a larger percentage of their GDP towards defense. Pompeo also says the U.S. needs partners like NATO countries. Lauren?
Correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee reporting from the State Department. Thank you, Wyatt. Up next, spring is in the air in Washington and remembering John Paul II on the anniversary of his death. Well, our neighborhood's looking pretty darn fine these days. Washington, D.C.'s famed cherry blossoms have reached their peak bloom, and tourists have reached their peak from all around the world. The trees, which were a gift from Japan in 1912, should be in blossom for about a week. Priests at a Catholic parish in northern Poland are being criticized after they burned books, including some from the Harry Potter series. The bonfire began when priests asked their parishioners to bring items they believed were possessed by evil spirits. In Poland, some church officials believe the best-selling Harry Potter series promotes sorcery. The priests say they wanted to alert parishioners to the negative influence of magic and the occult. My next guest knows firsthand about the horrible trauma of childhood sexual abuse. Preyed on by her own birth family, survivor Andi Buerger now uses her experience to bring awareness to the subjects of sexual abuse and human trafficking. Andi Buerger joins us, Executive Director of Beulah's Place. It's nice to see you from Redland, Oregon. Welcome back to our broadcast.
Nice to be here, Lauren. Thank you so much.
April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and there's a statistic I have to read from RAINN, the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, that every 9 minutes a child is sexually assaulted in the United States. As a result of your abuse, you actually thought about ending your life at age 5?
I did. I actually tried to end my life by running in front of an oncoming car. However, that particular day when I went down to the curb of my house, there weren't any cars coming, which was really unusual. And when you realize that God had his hand in it, not so much, but I thought being dead was better than having another minute or another day where my birth mother said my days were numbered, she could take me out any time. And it was just a horrible existence, and I just wanted to be at peace.
Well, you talk about healing in layers. What does that mean?
Well, it means that sometimes people expect healing to be instantaneous, and when there's a victim of sexual abuse or other traumas, it could be physical abuse, mental abuse, it doesn't always happen instantaneously. In my life, it happened in layers, but God spoke to my heart. I prayed, and he heard my cries, and he confirmed that things are complicated in a human. And so I was going to be healed. I would become whole, but it was a process. And a lot of people are impatient with the process. But
Want things really to just happen, right? I completely understand.
Yeah, and it's not like putting a Band-Aid.
You and your husband now run the nonprofit Beulah's Place to help teen boys and girls at risk in Oregon. How many people have you helped? How does your program work to support them?
Sure. We have actually graduated 37 adult teens, 18 to 20-year-olds that have gone through our Safe House program, where we have volunteer host families, kind of like fostering, but only for a 3 to 5 month period of time. In fact, one of those graduates just made Dean's List at the community college and has been accepted to a regular university. So we're really proud of her. But what we do is we offer them temporary shelter, food, clothing, medical, dental, any assistance we can, but mostly we accept them with no judgment. They come to us, we just want to get them safe and stable. And they have no safe people in their life.
The Pope issued a document today talking about the horrors, not of sexual abuse, but of human trafficking. What are you hearing from kids in your program and across the country about this?
From our 10 years in the field, so to speak, our teens do not feel law enforcement supports them, that they're not really citizens. They feel that if you're rich or have money, you get away with hideous acts against humanity. And they don't have the mental health support that they really need to have to heal. And those are some of the battles that we have. There are great people out there, but our teens don't usually come in contact. They're usually judged even by people in church. You know, how they look or how they act. They don't understand that these kids have been discarded and abandoned or trafficked or sexually abused to the point where they run, and they'd rather take their chances on the street.
Well, Andi Buerger, this is such an important issue. April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. Your organization is called Beulah's Place. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's been an honor.
For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. We'll leave you tonight with video of St. John Paul II on the 14th anniversary of his death. Good night, and God bless you.